welcome to another episode of Faith Move Forward. I am your host, Adam Size, and I have a special guest here, Pastor Matt Roskind, who is a friend. And so when we adopted our three kids, one of the things that was really passionate on my heart was that we find a youth group that was dynamic. And not only that dynamic, but find someone that was passionate about Jesus and not just goofy. You know what I mean?
That's how it goes.
And so when we came to this church first, and then we adopted three kids, and then Matt, that was during the pandemic, and then Matt started rolling out what he was doing, and his first email like really just caught my eye. I'm like, Lord, this is what I want. And since then, he's become a friend to my kids. I am dad. I enjoy being dad. I've always known who I am, and I knew that I would never be a friendly dad. I'm not a mean dad, so to speak, but I knew I had to be dad, especially given the circumstances that they came from. And it was so good to find Matt and his wife Alyssa that have just taken care of our kids and just loved them and pastored them and taught them, and you can just see it in it. So when the opportunity came up for this, I wanted to introduce him, but not only that, his story is so amazing. I mean, his salvation story, his life story, all that is amazing. So that's where we'll start right there. So Matt, tell me a little bit about how you came to Jesus.
Okay. So, I'm kind of stereotypical Southern kid. I was raised in church, went to a Christian school for a few years, but really, earlier than most, I turned my back on God. I remember being 6 years old and saying, at that point, you know, it's kind of what I've been hearing over and over again is just, Jesus just wants you to be nice.
Mm-hmm.
And I was already so insecure at 6. I was like, well, I'd rather be popular than be nice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, I think I'm done. Or I'm not interested, at least. I remember it very vividly.
Yeah.
And so middle school comes along. I've still been in church this whole time. I'm going on all the church trips. My parents are helping in youth. All of that. And then I get to middle school, and I think science is disproving God.
Mm-hmm.
And so by like 8th grade, I'm calling myself an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going into high school, and I flirt with being more like a Pharisee than I do a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I keep coming back to I want to be popular. Honestly, I was in love with sin.
Mm-hmm.
And so I flirted with it a few times, and that I went down like a pretty dark road.
So what do you think was driving this insecurity, or this thing that was just pulling you away from the truth?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like where I'm at right now is I'm doing a lot of going back to go forward.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my wife and I are in counseling, just trying to get healthier as a couple.
Absolutely.
And the whole time the counselor's been talking to me and not my wife. And so, you know, part of it was, and you know, this is just going deep, like real early. Part of it was I had a pretty traumatic experience when I was young that just really like shaped me. But I think what God has been walking me through like very tenderly over the really like the past month or two, maybe a little bit longer. I got molested when I was 5,
Mm-hmm.
and growing up, like I couldn't have told you
Mm-hmm.
how much that impacted me.
Mm-hmm.
It was a one-time thing. It wasn't a recurring thing. Complete stranger. Never saw him again. But it changed me.
Yeah.
And I never felt safe after that. That was my underlying, like, this is the literal foundation that I'm building the rest of my life on, is that I'm not safe. And that's something I'm still walking through. And so you couple that with, like, not, for whatever reason, my dad never intentionally did it. I think it was one time where my dad made me feel like I wasn't good enough for him.
Mm-hmm.
And then you couple that with this, and that's what that insecurity like really stemmed from for me.
Yeah. So as a future father, you understand those early childhood and how that could impact. Because I have 6, 12, 14, and an infant, and me looking back on some of the things that impacted me in my childhood, and being a 40-year-old man, you realize what that does. It sets a seed, but that seed begins to fester over time.
Yeah.
And so talk about the high school years where you're discovering yourself and figuring things out, and what's going on in Matt Roskind's life then.
So high school was this really weird time for me. Kind of on the surface, I was on top of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, all I genuinely cared about in high school was overarching was coping. Everything I did was a coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to date the prettiest girls in school. I wanted people to like me,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to be good at sports. But at the end of the day, like I also didn't care. I was just super numb. The truth is, in high school, there wasn't a lot of self-discovery for me because I was not introspective at all.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything I did was just like, I was just totally in a funk. I was in a daze. I was in a like permanent fog the entire time I was in high school. That continued into college, and I just, in a lot of ways, feel like as a Christian was, you know, a little over 3 years ago was the first time I got introspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of it was just coping, and there wasn't any real growth at all in high school or college.
Absolutely. Now looking back, and obviously you're a youth pastor, you're dealing with middle school and high schoolers, you understanding those formative years and how much it may have set you back, what are you telling, or what are you trying to instill in your students at this point in time?
A lot. I really, you know, especially it seems like we're trying to come out of the wake of Jesus just wants you to go to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that where will you go when you die?
Mm-hmm.
And it's an important question, but it's not how anyone in the Bible
It's not the
got led to faith.
Absolutely.
And so right now I'm really wanting students to hear that some point in your life, before you came to faith, even in faith, you had a deep underlying fear, a deep underlying lie that you believed, and that lie led you away from God. And that lie continues to want to lead you away from God.
Mm-hmm.
And all it is doing is an enemy that you have
Mm-hmm.
trying to steal the best life that God has for you. I'm not talking like prosperity gospel,
Mm-hmm.
anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about being rooted to the Father and knowing that He loves you and He wants to give you a better life than you could ever imagine.
That's so good.
Better than the opposite sex, better than drugs, better than alcohol, better than anything this world has to offer.
Absolutely.
And if they would just grab a hold of that,
Mm-hmm.
change the world.
That's so good. See, this is stuff that I wish I had. It took me 26 years, honestly, it took me 26 years to realize that God was good. He was not only good all the time, but He had good things for me.
Yeah.
It took me 26 years. I'm still wrapping my head up, but it took me 26 years to actually know that. I never truly believed it. And it was obviously circumstances that I saw, things that I went through, things that I've gone through, things that I put myself into, but it was always an underlying factor that He wasn't as good as advertised. And that was the lie that I believed. And so I never felt good enough. I never felt as if I was truly a son of God. I felt like I had to earn it, and I didn't feel like I was good enough to earn it. So that is so good that you are teaching it. This is I'm obviously not your average youth pastor, But tell me, I know you have some influences growing up, and looking back now, what they were trying to teach you, and you just not getting it now being on the other side of that.
Yeah. So the people that immediately come to mind are my parents, and they would both tell you they had very different upbringings from me, and the fact that they went into this both as first generation Christians, trying to figure things out the best they could. They really, and my mom in a lot of ways too, like really wanted this for me, and I just had no idea, how important it was.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the stuff that they told me and tried to instill in me, just completely lost it. Like just totally in one ear, out the other. And then my Bible study teacher, growing up, just like kept pursuing me.
Yeah.
And there were times where I literally like scoffed in his face at how dumb I thought Christianity was, and just kept pursuing me, kept loving me, was there for me through like the years when I was really sick, just through it all. And so that's the kind of stuff I reflect back on, is just the unconditional love. They never had a big sermon at me or anything, but looking back, I'm like, wow, they loved me when
you didn't love yourself.
I didn't love myself. I didn't love them. I didn't love God.
Right.
I was like a very, very rebellious, hurtful kid, and they still love me through that.
So we all have this point of where we get to, and then there's rock bottom. What was rock bottom for you?
So the real rock bottom for me was Alyssa and I were in our first year of marriage, and so it was not going well at all. We were first year of marriage. Rock bottom was looking at getting a divorce before we even hit our first anniversary. And so divorce was something that I'm not the guy who going into marriage is like divorce is an option.
Yes.
Like I'm not that guy. But this is just being real. True worst case scenario, if I'm gonna get a divorce and I have no intention, no heart to ever get one, it's not gonna be in the first year. I'm just being real honest. And so I was like, my wife's about to leave me. I've like really messed this thing up. Like, what are you doing? Like, you have an amazing woman that loves you and chose you, and it's in that season of looking at getting a divorce, being depressed out of my mind, being anxious about everything, that I was like, all right, like, this marriage is only going to work if I'm like bought into Christianity. If I do this like very, very cultural Christianity, which is what I was doing, if I do that and I don't really submit myself, this is going to be the hardest thing I've ever done, and it's going to be terrible, and it's going to be awful. And so it was in that season that was like my true rock bottom.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you realize that you have this amazing thing that God has given you, and you had to do something about it. I love the fact that you took the onus on you, and obviously when in marital issues, it's not just one person, one party, or anything like that. But I love the fact that you manned up and you took the responsibility on yourself and said, this is going to work, this is what I need to do. And then was there an encounter with God at that point in time? Or?
So it's funny how it worked out. I came to that realization. If this is going to work, I gotta do this. I need to follow Jesus. And I came to that realization. We're in counseling. My counselor gives me Wild at Heart by John Eldridge. And I had never read any Christian books before, and I read it, and like every single word jumped off the page at me. Yeah. And I was like, at this point, I'm still intellectually thinking, I want Christianity to be true, but I'm not going to commit intellectual suicide to get there. And so I read this book, and my heart gets so soft and so curious and so hungry for something real, for the real thing. And so it's in that, just maybe a week or two after I read it, we stumble on the Case for Christ. And we're watching it, and I'm thinking to myself, like, you gotta be kidding. There's intellectual, you can ask hard questions about Christianity, and there's intelligent, good answers. Absolutely. I was like, get out of town. Yeah. And so I watched the movie, and I'm so drawn in, and I'm hearing all this stuff for the first time. And I'm like, where has this been my whole life? How come no one introduced me to this? Right. And so I take that side, I read the Case for Miracles, and it gets into the science of creation. And really like the ordering of the universe. Yeah. And I start reflecting on it one day, like literally doing laundry in my bedroom. And I start thinking to myself, like, holy cow, this is real. Like, this is real. There is a God, and if there is a God, Jesus is the best explanation for him. Right. And I was just like, just right there in my bedroom, just peace like I had never felt. Couldn't have cared about anything. Absolutely. And I was like, all right, like, I'm so sorry. I did this so wrong for so long, but like, I want you. And show me how to do this. So.
Wow, that's incredible. So you get to this place, and now I imagine that there's a hunger for more. There's a hunger to go deeper. Obviously, like you said, you are an intellectual guy, and so what brought on that feeding? Where did you get that? Or
so that's a really good question. I can't answer it 100%. I think in that vein, because the hard part about when I got saved was I had 2 days where that peace, it didn't leave me. I was the happiest like person in the world, and I knew that I had gone into a new space, and I knew this was the direction my life was going. But after that 2-day period, I started to have doubts, because I was like, that fear just wants to come back. Yes. And so for the next few months, I was heavy into apologetics, trying to get an answer to every question, trying to get away from that fear. And so I wasn't going super deep spiritually right away. And I'm still in a season, in a space of trying to do that. And so to answer that, like, after getting saved, I was hungry, but I was also so scared to get hurt. And so I kept trying to find answer after answer after answer. And I didn't read a lot of theology books, Christian living books. I just went heavy apologetics. Until finally I was like, okay, you can't know the answer to everything. But do you have answers to the really big questions that you need to know? What about truth? What about God? What about the Bible? The authenticity, the reliability of it. And if I have those things, then I need to be able to say, all right, I can't answer it all. Now I need to go deep.
Right. So. Awesome. That's so good. That's so good. So you got to that point of, okay, I'm not gonna get every answer in, but that main focus, Bible, Jesus, all of that was answered. So then what happens after that?
So after that was just this season of, like I said, I think I'm very much in a place right now where I have this intellectual background, and I feel like more or less I can defend just about anything in our worldview to an extent. And I have a reason for believing what I believe. Now I think God is saying, all right, you have that there. Let's go into this deep spiritual season of healing. Let's go into this season of, like I said earlier, going backwards to go forward. And so he's been showing me how to he's been really correcting my idea of him, of recognizing how loving he is throughout the whole Bible, not just New Testament. Right. And then I really feel like now I've had a couple dreams, people have had other dreams about going deeper with Holy Spirit. And so, I mean, that's what I want. I have this intellectual background, but I want to become a man who doesn't have to have an answer for everything, but moves into an extreme extreme faith.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm the same way. I'm not as intellectual. I am, but I'm not as intellectual. But I've always been comfortable with the mystery of, and I don't have to understand, but I had to get to a place where I believed, but I never had to get to a place where I understand. And that's the curiosity that I'm thankful that I've always had, because as you said, you wanted to know, you needed to know, and there's so many people out there that are the same way. They need to know, and it's so good to know that a God that cares about that, even though He doesn't have to.
Yeah.
It's not that He doesn't have to care. He doesn't have to explain. And for those that search for that, He's there for that. That's such a beautiful part of your testimony.